Testing 1 1, testing 1 1.
One more, let me test you on the screen.
Testing 1 2, testing 1 2.
Oh, that's a trial one. Welcome to our finance meeting. Thank you for being here, finance and planning meeting this morning. I'm going to call to order for our meeting. We don't believe we have any citizen wishing to address the committee, so we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes. Second, all in favor, signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion pass. The next item, we're going to move over to our planning agenda first. So, Mr. Petty.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Couple of items today. Adam, if you'll come on up, we're going to talk about the master facility plan construction update. These are not action items. These are information items. So welcome, Adam.
Good morning.
Thanks, sir.
Today we're going to do a little bit of show and tell and maybe a little bit of bragging to the board. So we have some slides to put up.
You have a click of that.
There we go. So these are in response to a question of the board from Zim. In fact, we've been working on these and perfecting these for at least 8 months. And these are ready for public consumption now. These placemats that you'll see are updates that you will start receiving monthly regarding the projects that are under construction. And I want to state that again, under construction, not the design projects. So the first one we have is a temporary parking lot and campus improvements that go with that. Just a little bit about the structure of this placemat. On the left side, where you see project scope, project total cost, project milestone dates, those will largely remain unchanged throughout the project. That is the goal. In the center, dead center of the project, you see the project schedule. That should also remain unchanged. Above that, you see the cash flow projections for the individual project. The blue bars being what was projected to be consumed each month. The gray bars being additive over time as we are actually consuming the dollars, and then the cumulative, the cumulative total is the orange line that you see. So at any given time, we can be above or below the cash flows, and the goal is to not be above the orange bar at the end. And I'm being a little facetious, we will not be above the orange bar, but that will be a live spreadsheet that you will see coming forward, and you'll see the cash flows as we progress through. The items below, the completed activities, the upcoming activities, and the decisions, issues that we are encountering, that will be updated every single month, as well as the pictures to the right. The pictures to the right in this case represent the relocation, or in fact, new warehouse, the demolition of the old warehouse up on the Bryan Avenue lots, the temporary parking lot that is under construction right now, Lot A in the green space, and the image below shows the redo of the entrance for the pavilion parking garage and the reslate of that back to its original intended design, which makes the garage more efficient and delivers more parking spaces. And as the board may remember, parking is everything for this project to get the parking that we need in order to build everything else. So that is the first placemat. The next placemat is the PEC. Again, we have the project budget, the milestones, the scope, the cash flows. As you can see, much longer time frame. The scale of the cash flow chart is much more minute because it's longer. We are slowly ramping that up. We look to start the PEC construction in August. That's the main bulk of the PEC, and we are well underway with the connector right now. You can see activities there, and first an image of the PEC from the northeast direction, an interior view of the front entry lobby, and then the construction that's going on. In fact, that black component, that's waterproofing around the elevator pit that spans the vertical distance between the connector that will be to the upper portion of that that connects to the PUC, and the PUC itself proper, which will be in the lower portion of that picture. Next is Medical Home Southwest. Again, we have the budget and milestones and scope. We are moving forward very quickly. We do have our foundation permit, and that work is underway. So we are progressing with that, and we're very happy about that after a long haul with the city. And with us making really good connections with them, they have worked very hard to help us in that regard. So I'm very appreciative of all the folks in planning and construction in the city for doing that. Again, a few rendering shots as we progress through construction over the months. Those shots will change over time as we show you as we make headway in the project. So. We asked for the work release package. In that case, we did a lot of forward buying. We intentionally did that. For a number of components, we bought the steel package out for that project to make sure it delivers on time. And later today, I will be asking for work package number 2, which will be the rest of the project, and that will also be front-loaded for the air handling units, the chillers, et cetera, that are
Okay,
in that
so that's
project.
just front-loading for purchases.
Absolutely.
All right.
And we're going to see that a lot in these projects because, by way of example, air handlers are 46 weeks out. Our cogen engines are 80 weeks out. It's pretty significant. In fact, when we're bidding, that is outweighing price in many instances because we just cannot delay the schedule. The delay in the schedule is more than the price difference than we would expect from the bid.
So your projection did not contemplate early purchase of some of those components?
No, sir, we did not anticipate the market being this far out at the time.
All right. Thank you.
And again, it's okay if the gray bar is over the individual blue bars as long as we never eclipse the cumulative that's in the orange bar.
Right.
And if we do, there better be a very good reason, like a pre-purchase, that in the next month it will correct, or in the next 2 months it will correct.
Okay, thanks.
Question, the gray and blue bars are not the same thing, right? The blue bar is each quarter by itself, and the gray bar is cumulative?
The blue bars are the projected cash flow, which was anticipated by Cummings, the estimating firm that brought on board. The gray bars are the actual cash flows, cumulative cash flows by month that we have actually spent. So one is projected, one's actual.
But the blue is not cumulative, it's standalone? for
It
each
is not
quarter.
cumulative. We're trying to show what's going on each and every month.
Okay, so you can't compare the blue and the gray and,
Right. In that sense, no. The orange is the cumulative of the blue, though.
okay.
Got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Picture's worth 1,000 words, but when I look at your orange line, am I to determine from that you're right on schedule on that line, or where are you? Because it looks like you're way below it.
What's that now? I'm sorry.
On your projected cumulative, the orange line, which should be a running total of the expenses going on.
Of all the blues.
Pardon me?
It's a running total of all the blues added up.
And where on that orange line do you fall right now?
We fall,
You're not on it, I don't believe.
what's that?
I said, I don't believe you're on it right now.
We are not, on. You mean from a schedule standpoint or a cost standpoint?
I can't tell either one, okay? So I guess what I'm saying is that you ought to have another line that is representative of the actual accumulative that would track the orange line.
Okay, we can do that happily.
Because that's the real tell.
Yeah, because the way you depict it, you would presume that the gray represents a bar that should be very close to your projected cumulative unless there's been just substantial savings somewhere. So I think the gray bar is the problem. The gray bar should be reflective in that projected cumulative, and I'm not sure that it is. Right, right.
There's not a projected actual.
And it's important because the only way we can really evaluate how well we're doing is to be able to look at the total picture against schedule.
Right.
And if cost and schedule are way below, then we're way behind.
Right.
So we need to be able to look at that way.
Okay,
And that's all the charts, not
Yes,
just
sir.
this one.
yes, sir.
Right. absolutely. Good point. All right, Adam, anything else on these placemats?
No, sir.
All righty. Then you've got your next item, I believe, is clinical engineering update.
Yes, so the board may recall that the board approved Agility to perform clinical engineering services for JPS about 6 or 8 months ago. As part of that contract, there are quarterly updates that are required by Agility to JPS, and we wanted to come back and present the results from the first quarter and the substantial improvements that have been made. We would kind of want to brag on Agility for doing what they have done. It's everything that we expected from them and the board expected in that presentation. So the first slide speaks to the first 3 months of their operation here, what they found, and their completion rate over those 3 months of how they've recovered the state that we were in. This is PM completion by month, preventive maintenance by item. You can see that the completion trends for high risk and low risk were marginal at best. Now they are at 98% on-time completion. There were a number of pieces of equipment that were not found, not available initially, and we have caught up to that over 3 months. Again, we're talking about 14,700 pieces of equipment. At the time when they started, it's now over 15,000. That number is going to come up again in this discussion. So yeoman's work in doing this. The team has really been on board, and this goes hand in hand with what we're doing with the staff to train them to take out service contracts, third-party service contracts. So a lot of that is coming in-house.
Adam, quick question. Do you have any sense of the regulatory risk assessment from delays in completion of PMs?
Say that again, the regulatory risk of what?
Do you have any back-of-the-napkin estimate, a risk assessment on any regulatory risk for not having these completed on time?
I do. It wouldn't be a dollar value. It would be that they would be IJs with Joint Commission if this had not been done.
Well, yeah, that's my question. Is there a risk assessment around the potential impact on Joint Commission?
That was done before we transitioned clinical engineering under my leadership, and then we brought in an Agility to repair this. So we have looked at that risk, and that was part of the audit that was done that the board has knowledge of with other information, PHI information, and PM completion rate for high risk and low risk. So yes. Yeah, I'm trying to be very careful.
And we can do that, Daphne, if we need to do that. But Adam is being obtuse for a reason, and that is, yeah, yeah.
Okay, the next one is inventory. So I mentioned the 14,700. You may recall that I mentioned previously when Agility came in, there were 21,000 pieces of equipment on the in the database inventory. In fact, we had 14,007 of actual live components that we were utilizing. We trimmed that down to that number. We have seen growth in that number as we are relocating new devices or new devices have been added. Again, we still have missing or duplicate records in the database. We've remade the database from what it was. So it's taking time to reconcile the two between what was existing and what is current and what we know. Again, we have some that we find in closets that are out of service, and we are still retiring those. Yes, ma'am. Okay. The next one is capital planning. This was the largest piece of going through assessing each piece of equipment in the inventory. This was not due until next year. Sharon asked us to move that up, and we did, and we had it for this year's capital, and we have done that assessment. So we are now making capital decisions based on actual use and life cycle analysis of our existing inventory. And lastly,
Let's not let that escape the moment, okay? That may be excellent, but understated in terms of its importance, because what it says is, for the first time, I believe, in history, JPS actually now has a preventive maintenance and capital planning system that tells us what's broken, what needs to be addressed, when it needs to be replaced, depreciation, all of these components that have, quite frankly, before Adam got here, never been done well, ever. And so this is monumental in terms of us being able to maintain this facility the way it's supposed to be maintained, keeping it safe, keeping it where it should be, not being in the situation that we found ourselves when Adam got here, and recognizing some places where there was some significant problem. So I just want to say thank you, Karen, to you guys for the work that's gone into this, because this is Herculean relative to some of the other things we looked at.
No, and it helps us
Some time ago, in area Trent, I asked a question. Okay, I asked a question about this, and do we have a replacement fund set up that addresses this? I didn't get a response at that time, so I'm going to ask now again. You weren't here. Okay. But when we budget, do we budget replacement so that we're putting money in so that when we look at this and we got to replace this, can we afford it?
Yeah, so it's probably a little bit more complicated.
Yes. So what it allows us to do is to understand where our equipment is located, what's been the usage on it, and then to be able to prioritize those equipment needs or capital needs that we see coming up for the following year. So we look at things that's how many times it's been serviced, is it costing us more to service than it is to go ahead and replace it? Do we have the same equipment sitting out at one of the medical homes that's never used? Let's rotate and bring that in and then make a decision as to whether that needs to be replaced. So it allows for all of that analysis to go on so that we're better utilizing our capital dollars, but it does allow us to replace these proactively, because when I came, there was this contingency, and you guys would pass the budget, and then all of a sudden, someone would come in and say, so-and-so's they're just down. I mean, we're never going to be able to replace them. And so I'm like, why didn't we know this at the time we were, setting our capital? So this allows us to be much more
And Ralph,
proactive and not
your
have.
question is exactly right, and I think the answer to it specifically is not yet, because what you're contemplating is basically a permanent capital maintenance fund of sorts that would have us setting dollars aside for capital replacements at some point in time in the future. I think that's where we would love to be, but I think right now it's what we got and how much it's going to cost to fix it and what's the replacement like.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking that from my city days.
Yeah, I get it.
And,
Right, so,
and I guess I'd ask the question differently than Rev. I would assume now that we've done this, that there'll actually be a sub-line item in the budget that talks about those things that are going to have to be taken care of during that budget year, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's where we need to get, for sure.
right.
Okay, and the last slide is mean time to repair and uptime. So as you can see, the chart on the bottom is really telling. We had uptime, that means where equipment is in service and the amount of time it's in service and operating. It was below 80%. We are now up at 98% within 3 months. And you can see the mean time to repair has dropped substantially.
Right.
Now it's 8 days. Yes, there are a few outliers typically for parts from overseas, but down being at 8 days, that's Herculean for
Yeah,
these
it is
guys.
great.
So, and that is our bragging session.
Questions for Adam?
No, I'd just like to say thank you, Adam. That good report, and I understand it, so I really appreciate it.
It's a very large team that's working on this. I mean, across the board. It's a lot of work.
Adam, you asked a question. On this last chart, when you say mean time to repair, which equipment specifically is that? Aggregate?
It's aggregate of all the equipment.
Everything?
Yes, sir. So typically, like if we needed to quench an MRI because the fluid for the magnet went down, we don't do that. We need somebody to come on site to do that. Or if we can't get a board for something because it's coming from Germany, that may change as opposed to if it's repairing an X-ray piece of X-ray equipment, we do that in-house. We repair the MRIs generally in-house. We do a lot of it in-house. That was also part of this contract with Agility, is to shed our third-party service agreements and train up our staff so that we don't rely on that. And that was millions of dollars that we're shaving off the bottom line to do that.
So this is the main time to repair all the equipment that the hospital has?
Yes, sir.
Not just medical equipment, but,
No, this is only medical equipment, fixed and mobile medical equipment.
okay,
It's very specific to that.
Other questions on the clinical engineering update? If not, Adam, take us through your RFQ for security consultant, please, sir.
We have a request for 2 RFQs. The first one is release of a security consultant for the master facility plan to help us with all of our security components, assessing what we're going to do with security, as well as being a futurist to project what's going on with workplace violence and access and all of that in future security embeds within the construction of the master facility program. So we asked for the opportunity to release that to the streets so that we can find folks to help us in that regard.
And for this, we will need an action, right, Daphne? So I'd entertain a motion for the security consultant RFQ. Motion from Dorothy, second from Zim. Any question or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. RFP for CMAR.
Yeah, so this is for a construction manager at risk for the main hospital, the replacement hospital. We just received word who the architect is going to be from the county. And now we'd like to bring in the CMAR so that they can work in conjunction for pricing models and means and methods for delivery of the new hospital.
Is this an item that goes to commissioners or not?
It will.
Part of me says there's no use in, well, I'll just be quiet. We do need a motion then for the CMAR RFP. Yes.
Explain, we proposed an architect to the county and they approved it, or?
We proposed 2 and they selected 1.
Any other questions for Adam? If not, we need a motion.
Second.
Motion, second by Dorothy. Any question or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The same sign, that motion carries. Thank you, DT. Back to you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Adam. Great work. At this point, I'd like to invite our CFO, Ms. Clark, for the CFO report.
Good morning. I've got a couple of quick updates for you. I've mentioned our federal single audit is very close to completion. I did sign off on that yesterday, so probably sometime next week, the final report will be issued. I just wanted to let you know that there were no findings, and there is no materiality on the federal award grant. So, and someone asked the last time, why is it called a single audit? It's because we have multiple federal awards, and the code in which this is done under, we used to call them A133 grant or audits, but we just have to have one single audit for all of our federal awards. So we do that once a year, and so it was a very clean audit. So that'll be posted to your portal probably in the next couple of weeks.
She was kind not to name me by name for that question.
Was that you? I didn't really
That was me.
remember. All right. Well, it was a great question because I asked a couple of people and I did not get consistent answers. So I decided to do a little research myself, but that is the official answer. Also, as we plan for the budget retreats in July, we did have some schedule conflicts. So you should see this reflected on your calendar. But instead of having one session on the 21st and one session on the 28th, I think what we polled and worked best is a longer session on the 21st. So those will be combined, both kind of the strategy, the new items, as well as probably after lunch, a little bit of the nitty-gritty with numbers and volume, and just to prepare the board for what you will likely see on August 10th. So it will not be, from my standpoint, a budget presentation, but I will go through many of the assumptions that we've made that will be drivers of the budget. We will not have our certified tax rolls by the 21st. I may be able to get an update, but those don't come through until that last Tuesday of July. So same schedule as last year. We never know quite where we're going to settle in, but you should see all of those changes reflected on your calendars this week.
Just so you guys know, the second strategy meeting, budget meeting, will be a long day for us because we have, in the morning, we also have finance, right?
No, this is on a Friday, so it's going to be a long day, but it's not going to be part of the Finance Committee, so.
No, I'm talking about the second part on the 27th.
The 27th, I think we'll cancel. And then we are moving, so we had 2 3-hour sessions. So I think what we're planning to do, based on your calendar availability, is to begin at 9 a.m. on the 21st, have lunch, and then I will try to wrap up my update that would have occurred later in the last couple of hours.
Okay.
So it will be a longer day, but just one.
2 cookies, huh?
2 cookie day.
How many cookies would you like, Sim? We'll make sure to get hot deliveries throughout the morning. I can arrange that for you. So if there's no other questions around that, I'm going to go ahead and go through our results from May. From a volume standpoint, our inpatients, they were higher than budget and higher than last month. We also saw kind of a on budget month for CMI, as well as a continued elevation in our length of stay. We continue to have a few really high stay dismissals that are skewing the last few months of this year. So I think it's a good thing they're getting out of the hospital, but that calculation is based on who has been discharged, not who we have in-house. So it's difficult to predict, and it does vary month by month. From an outpatient standpoint, our emergency room visits continue to grow. We are doing well with our left without being seen, which is kind of a complement to the rise in rates. We are just slightly above 2%, which is kind of a best for us, and it's very respectable from a benchmarking standpoint. Urgent care visits are growing as well. These have continued to be over budget. You see the beige line, that was last year. And so we budgeted right where we were last year, but we have seen an increase in those. We are about 15% over budget year to date, so that's been a slight increase. Our primary care visits are back on budget for the month of May, and you can see there was an uptick as well in the specialty care clinic visits on the bottom graph to the right.
in tying it to last year? What's the explanation there?
So I can give you my thoughts around that. Healthcare has been really interesting since 2020. We had this huge decline and fall off. And then we kind of thought it was over in 2020. We were up on an uptick, and then we had a couple of more times where we had to shut down. And even in as late as last January, we had kind of a spike in cases. So we've had this slow return to a historical volume, but we're very cautious in just assuming that we want to staff up and budget to pre-COVID volumes. I will say that as I look back through some of these metrics, that we are close to our 2019 volume. And so I do think with certain capacity constraints as well, we'll start to see that level off. That is one thing that I watch very closely as we budget volumes, is where does that put us with our inpatient capacity? We can only have so many beds by licensure. So about the only thing you can control there is throughput.
Tim,
So I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, Tim, I was just going to say, it was hard to predict coming out of COVID just what that return was going to be. But we are seeing, and as we continue to staff up to capacity, we're starting to see that there is more demand that's coming in.
It's an estimation problem.
Yeah.
Something going on in the community.
No, I think it's just we have not kind of figured out on the trending what's going to happen. I think we'll get closer as we're further out with COVID. Yeah.
Thank you.
Inpatient and outpatient surgery cases have remained strong. Again, that is one that when you look at those surgery numbers together, we are at 19 volumes or slightly higher when inpatient and outpatient are combined. And then on behavioral health, they remain pretty steady as they have all year. Our patient days, Tim, this is an example of we were pretty much at capacity last year, so there's only so many behavioral days that we can put through our inpatient facility. The emergency visits have remained pretty trended with last year, and then our clinic visits have seen a nice increase.
Sharon, does the overall occupancy rate that you tracked a couple of slides back reflect the inpatient behavioral health?
No, this occupancy rate is for inpatient med-surg only.
So could we see behavioral health occupancy rates?
Yeah, I'll tell you they're probably right around 90 to 95%, which is going to be the top that you could achieve. I will say that as you look at patient days, what you don't see here is an increased admission and a lower length of stay as we manage very tightly. So patients served, I believe, are about 450 higher, not reflected in the patient days. You have the same patient days as you did last year, but we actually have been able to get 450 admissions in addition to what we've done because of the throughput.
I think it's important as we continue to pursue the capital improvement plan that we always track our occupancy relative to our, capacity, because when you look at inpatient capacity, that includes room that's got 2 people in it, right? Or 3. And so it's a little deceptive. If you throw psych into it, now we're looking at occupancy rates that are way high relative to what we can really service. So I wonder if it might not be a decent metric to start tracking on the psych side too, to be able to look at occupancy rate relative to our capacity.
We do track it, but I can definitely add it like to that first slide, just add a line and we can look at their occupancy for the inpatient beds.
Thanks.
Welcome. It's a good question. On our financial metrics slide, not a whole lot different to report here. We are still positive and favorable on our FTEs per APD, but as I look at the next page, you'll see some of the impacts of the salary escalation in market that we've had. Yes, sir.
Help me remember the difference between new member and term member on the connection.
So one of the things on the connection slide, which is at the bottom right, we have a big in and out every month. So the definition for a new member is anybody who has been signed up during that month of May. So in the slide, we had about 3,300 new members sign up. The termed members, they are given a certain number of months of coverage before they have to reapply. So they're either not, that natural time frame has expired and they have not renewed their membership in connection. They may not have qualified. Maybe their income has risen or moved out of the county, or they could have also gotten commercial insurance. A lot of times, even though we use a lot of efforts to try to get those people re-enrolled, so it's a seamless renewal, they don't renew until they actually have to come to JPS and have a service provided. If they do that, that service is covered because we do have a retroactive component to the connection program.
So but we have a tracking system on the term members to know, in other words, if they just didn't re-enroll, that we would ask why, we find out why.
We actually start trying to send communication, and we actually start to call 60 or 90 days before their enrollment period would naturally end. So we do have a lot of efforts around re-enrollment, but you know, a lot of people just let it term for different reasons, and then they do have an opportunity to re-enroll if services are received here at JPS.
Sharon, if they re-enroll, where do we add them? Are they added as a new member or where?
If they are termed, then they would come back on in a later month as a new member.
Okay, I think that was the question, yeah.
I will confirm that, but I believe that's the way that we're calculating. So anyone that has fallen off will be in one of the termed, and then as they re-enroll, it could be someone completely new to connection, could have been expired for 2 months, could have been expired for 6 years.
Not expired at all. They just continue.
If they re-enroll themselves and there's no gap of coverage, I don't believe they would be in any one of these numbers. Yeah. Because they wouldn't be termed if we got them, yes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of effort that goes in every month, and there's a lot of movement in these numbers that you don't see from the graph.
It might be helpful for us to know how many of our connection are continuing. I mean, I know I see the new one.
Re-enrollment number?
Yeah.
Sure.
How many of those continue? Okay.
I'll report back if my understanding of that calculation is correct next month.
Before we move on, I forgot what chart that was last month when Blake pointed out the discrepancy. It was an error in the...
Yes, it was an error, and that was the top left graph up here for payer mix. As we were entering in numbers into the graph, the commercial and Medicare, I believe, or Medicaid it was Medicare, got swapped. So this month shows that there is, the first column is for the month of May. The second column is for the 8 months ended year to date. And then we have budget year to date. And then for comparative purposes, we have prior year on the right side. The only thing that is, that I'm watching very closely is the re-enrollment requirement for Medicaid. As you remember, during COVID, those patients were not, or under the public health emergency, they were not required to re-enroll. They were just left on the Medicaid roll until this point in time. So over the next 4 to 6 months, all of those that should have expired will be reevaluated. And that is, the term is the Medicaid unwinding. It's a interesting term, but it's just really getting people re-enrolled and requalified for their Medicaid benefit. We have seen a drop in our Medicaid book of business this month, and we saw a little bit last month too. And I think that will be a natural gap until we can get those people requalified and back through eligibility to see if they would qualify for either an ACA plan, requalify themselves through Medicaid, or potentially the Connection program. I can. There's one commercial plan that we signed at the beginning of the year that's brought significant volume. It's an ACA plan. And we currently are the only inpatient facility that's in network. So we have seen quite an increase in physician charges and the medical center charges. We do know that this plan is looking to have other systems enter into their network. And so during our budget discussion, we'll probably have a conversation about a slight decrease in that commercial mix, as natural attrition would happen as they have multiple choices of somewhere that might be closer physically to them. So, but that has been quite an unexpected uptick for this year, but I do think we'll see some attrition from that plan leave us next year.
Can you say what the plan is?
I'd prefer not to,
Okay.
but if we wanted to move into closed, we could discuss it further.
Nope, I don't have any question. We're good.
Any other question? I'm sorry.
Maybe Dr. Duncan help me with this, or Dorothy. The difference between Jerry Phillips, Ms. Phillips, no, the federal. Yeah. Those persons who go there versus the persons who come here. So if a person does not renew here, they can go to that facility and get served.
You're asking who do they receive?
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm asking. I mean, if I'm not a JPS connection person, can I go to that facility and get served?
You can.
Okay. So maybe if I didn't qualify here, can I go there and get served?
You can.
Okay. I guess I'm trying to just work in my mind because on the connection of.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you kind of what their payment is going to be.
Okay.
They do get, from what I understand, a higher Medicaid reimbursement than we do. Sharon, you may know more about this, but basically their patient population looks a lot like our patient population. It's just how they get reimbursed for who they see. So I think they can see undocumented, they can see, but pretty much the same patient population that shows up here. They see themselves, because we don't have very many here, many states have a lot of FQHCs to do a lot of their community health care because there are not restrictions that we actually have here. Exactly.
Yeah, because when I was out to the facility not too long ago, I know she mentioned that we now can take JPS connection patients, and I kind of questioned that.
She doesn't take JPS connection patients because those are they're almost like
I'm
in-network
sorry.
for us.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause
Those who fit
we have a
the-
closed system here, so
Right.
once you are on JPS
Right.
connection, all your health care remains here. So it's a way for us to control costs, yet we don't pay her to see JPS connection patients.
Right, okay.
So from an income statement perspective, this month, we were once again favorable to budget. A lot of that net patient revenue that you see up at the top comes from the additional volumes that we've been experiencing both for inpatient and not to the same degree the outpatient increase. We do have an uptick in the commercial payer mix. And we do have some Medicare cost report positive impacts that we did not know to budget for when we had the budget approved. So there were some pass-throughs from Medicare that are occurring during this fiscal year. On the salaries, that is the largest by far overage along with supplies. Most of those overages are supported by the additional volumes that are coming through, all but about $640,000 on the salary line item can be explained by volume. And then on the supplies, those are a lot of OR supplies. Those tend to be very expensive, as well as pharmaceuticals and other medical supplies are driving that $2.8 million overage. Year to date, it's been very consistent throughout the year. Net patient revenue is the same reason that I just explained for the month. We have accrued $20 million so far for the Medicaid supplemental funding that's over budget. Again, that's due to the HARP program. I will tell you that the state has delayed notifying us of what final payments will be for DISH and UC. So we continue to try to figure it out. We are accruing to budget on those programs. So the new date is going to be at the end of June. So if we get that information in the next week or two, we'll be able to right-size our budget estimate. You might see a pickup, most likely an overall pickup, but some of the programs are over budget and some of the programs are under budget. But I think it will be a net pickup for 2023. Are there any questions on the income statement? Again, this is for 8 months, year to date.
To do a second income statement and replace the budget column with prior year?
I'll be happy to add the prior year column up there. It just gets really busy.
I mean, that's why it's suggested just take this image, this presentation, and just a second one, but so it wouldn't get too busy, just replace budget with prior year.
We'll get back with you on that.
We're
Let me
happy to.
take a look at what's driving all that information behind the scene when I meet with her later on, and then we'll get back with you on that.
Comment on that. Looking back at prior years, maybe one time might be worthwhile, but because of all the changes that have taken place, I don't know that it's going to give us any vision as to where we are. But maybe starting with this year, we need to track prior years to see over time what we're doing.
We usually do that during the strategy so that we can plan for next year, but
Yeah.
It's because of all the explanation that comes with it, grant or no grant, and then you have defer, prepay during COVID, and then we still have to pay back. They have to offset a lot of stuff. That's why it's challenging. That's why I want to have a conversation with the leadership before we commit to that. But more likely we'll visit and do a one-time to see. It's probably beneficial for the 3 new board members to see where we are. And then, yeah.
Well, it's pretty traditional with financial statements to show prior year comparisons. That's a standard format.
I will be bringing, we'll update our projection for '23 after we close the June. So I've told you guys I'll be bringing that next month to the Finance Committee. And what I can definitely do is add prior year into that projected discussion. And maybe we just do that periodically, if that's a concern, DT.
Probably more a mid-year point, so we see where we are. Do we need to make adjustment?
Sure.
Right. And then help us better understand what to prepare for the following year, or we adjust the budget in mid-year. What thing? Yes, sir.
Sharon, you said $640,000 is all that can't be explained because of increase in
Salaries.
and whatnot. Is the hiring getting better? Because contract services is still over. Is any of that getting better? And is that the reason that number seems relatively low, 640,000?
Year to date, we're still, if you flex the budget for volume, we're almost $4 million favorable to budget, to the flex budget. But over the last couple of months, I think several things have happened. We have had to do some market adjustments with the escalation of salaries so that we don't lose people.
Sure.
So I believe those are starting to come through, and we're seeing the impact of that. We're trying to, my team's trying to validate my assumption there. And then I believe that we have seen an increase in our ability to hire people, but they're still kind of in a training phase and they're not truly productive. So I think that's creating some complexities as well. But based on this month and last month, I think what's happening is those additional salary dollars that were required are starting to come through.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
I'll go back to that prior year discussion.
Yes, sir.
If we're going to do prior year, then there will be some written narrative where we see things that were way out one year versus where they are this year. Or, because my only concern about looking at prior year is that we raise the question not knowing why there's such a difference. Because when you look at we're going through the COVID years, we will be so way out of balance, if it's a normal year to year. So I would just hope there'll be some narrative to explain why there's such a difference in those particular columns.
Sure.
Yeah, for me, the prior year is important because when we compare actual to budget, our outlook is based on how accurate was our budgeting, how realistic was our budgeting. And a check on the accuracy of your budgeting is the trends over times. And so prior year, yes, with COVID, it totally distorts the comparison, and a narrative would be helpful to explain that. But prior year is a check on our budget quality. And if we base our pleasure or displeasure with the financials solely on budgeting, then we're not basing it on how are we actually performing, but how is our performance compared to how our budget was. And the budget's really not that important as are we improving over time?
That's why we're looking at all the number in the beginning, all the statistic, all the monthly statistic and year-to-date statistic there that give you somewhat of indication of where they are, which they all tie together somewhat. So that's why one of the last few months I've been asking the difference between the case mix index and the length of stay. to see if anything changes there so that we can take a look at, because those are indication how much your reimbursement is going to be, right? Driving those things. And then we see all the emergency visits and everything else, and there is year to date, and there's month to month, and then all the chart go back 12 months. Starting off the calendar year, so you can see the trend over time also as well. The difficult part is when you deal with these numbers, let me make sure. It's very, very hard. When you look at, give you an instant capacity, bed capacity and all that stuff, since if you have different gender, we have share room, so you close that room. So the number licensed for, we don't get a chance to utilize them all, right? You have an inmate, you shut down that room. And then you have somebody with mental health, you probably, based on, you may have to shut down that room even though it's for 2 or 3 people, whatever that is. So those are indication. So we're trying to compensate that by looking at capacity, the bed capacity, way over. Anything over 70 is dangerous, and we're in the 80 or 90. I mean, we're way up there from other hospitals that would have been building the tower 10 years ago. And we're trying to run as much as we can. We cannot increase revenue if we don't have capacity to put people in the bed and all that stuff. So that's a lot of explanation on operation and stuff. So that's why the number, it is what it is, right? But it's more important for us to make sure that all the indicators are there so that does it align to where we expected, anything we need to pay attention to. And there's a matter of contracting of insurance also as well. So it's very complex. We can go through all that stuff, but it will take all days to go through that. So that's why I can't hesitate to change too much on it until we really see, is that something that we will continue to use, or is it something that we only use it 1 or 2 times and make, because anything that we ask, the whole staff have to recalculate. Sometimes they may not have the capability, depends on how do you do budgeting and how your number coming back. Can you track rolling numbers and all that stuff? So I know where you're going, and let's let us discuss internally and see where we are. I'm not for it or not opposed to it. If we just need to explore a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Any other questions on, yeah, Tim?
This is relevant maybe for other discussions, but we're $270,000 under on budgeting for ad valorem. Is that just because how we book it? I know that we typically get once.
No, so our budget, the 388,846, is based on the tax rolls, which were certified last July. So that's the estimate. We have appeals that come through. So all of the appeals that were outstanding, like right now, I know that 8% of the total properties today, or as of June 15th, are still have appeals pending. So they try to estimate as best they can what that's going to do to the appraised values. And then there's also lawsuits that might extend multi-year, especially with mineral or business accounts that can be outside of that estimate. So there's a right sizing. Some years it's slightly above, some years it's not, but it's really a small variance when you look at the total.
Yeah, it definitely. So is that a TAD problem, a TAD efficiency problem on lawsuits? And
I don't know if I would say it's an efficiency problem. I think that we base our budget off of one moment in time, and then they continue to do their daily work throughout the next 16, 18 months. And the estimates that they use just aren't perfect. Mm-hmm. I don't know that my estimates would be a whole lot better, but I don't know that I would say that. I just think it's a great big number with a few moving parts, and they do their best to estimate where they think that they're going to end. And they do base it on prior history. It's not a guess. But that's all I know about that. I will say that as taxes are collected, they are remitted to us very quickly by the county. So that's as good an estimate on the actual column as we're going to have.
Well, and more a comment than a question. I mean, 34 million over on patient service revenue just because of increased patients. I know that's a lot of work. It represents a lot of effort on the team's part, so thank you all for that. 20 million over on, again, supplemental Medicaid funding, tremendous effort there, and 32, we're really 25 on investment income over. I know that's a lot of work, so thank you for everything everybody's doing there. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. We're going to move on to the next.
We do need
approval, right?
We do need approval.
Yes,
Yeah.
may I have a motion for approval for the unaudited financial report for May, please?
Move approval.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you, ma'am. Next one, we'll welcome our Chief Nursing Officer. Morning, Jill.
Good morning.
The floor is yours, ma'am.
So I have 3 pricing agreements today, all related to ortho trauma supplies. All 3 were part of an RFP process. 5 were awarded, and I'm bringing 3 of those today. We'll bring 2 at a later date. First is with Smith & Nephew. I'm asking for approval for a pricing agreement for orthopedic implants and supplies, specifically for knees, hips, and pelvic implants. Annual cost of $2.65 million, and it is approved in our operational budget.
Motion for approval?
Move approval.
Any question? If none, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passed. Next one, please.
This is a pricing agreement for skeletal dynamics for orthopedic trauma implants and supplies, specifically fingers, wrists, hands, small joints, humerus. Skeletal dynamics, again, was selected through the RFP process. Annual cost of $108,596, and again, is approved in our operational budget.
Move approval.
Second.
Second. Any question or discussion? If none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Item D, please.
I'm asking for approval for a pricing agreement for MedArtis for specialty implants for the upper extremities as well, a different type of upper extremity implant. Annual cost of $995,000 and some change, again, approved in our operational budget.
And motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Question, discussion? If none, all in favor? Signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion passed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Adam Lane.
So good to see all of you again. It's been a long time. I'm here to present work authorization package number 2 for Medical Home Southwest between Burn Postel and the county for $12.3 million. This allows for the continued construction of the Medical Home Southwest.
May I have a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second. Question or discussion? If none? Yes, sir.
This is a process question. I know the county's already approved this. Why do we vote again? Just approving the actual agreement?
So this is an extension of their contract, so it increases the dollar value of their contract.
Yeah.
Awarding different than
Yeah,
contracting.
gotcha.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anything in closed session? We do not. We do not have anything in closed session, so the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Well.